Thank you so much for coming today. What a treat to be here. Thank you all for coming. So this is the music and audio production career panel. If you're looking for the dolphin one, that's just down the hall. And it is powered by Focusrite. Today we are we are absolutely blessed to have this amazing, fantastic panel of experts that are here to share their insights on getting started, on discussing ways for students and teachers to build their professional networks, and to answer your questions. So you might actually start thinking about whatever questions you might have as we go along. And we'll save those for the end if we could. Let's meet our guests. So originally from Detroit, Dope Candy is a sonic powerhouse, an accomplished producer, audio engineer, DJ, and educator. Known for her genre-blending melodic approach, she creates immersive experiences that pull from hip-hop, R&B, and alternative styles. Candy is a featured artist for Nissan's Electric Beats Collective, has performed at the A3C Festival and at Complex Con, and has collaborated with brands like H&M, Complex, and Virgin Hotels. Ladies and gentlemen, Dope Candy. Right on. So power couple Jeff Fair and Star Parodi spend most of their waking hours creating. Since their groundbreaking work on the iconic recording of the James Bond theme, Star and Jeff have struck an amazing balance between the worlds of scoring, recording, producing, arranging, conducting, and live performance. I'm tired just talking about what you all do. The common thread of all of their pursuits is satisfying, inspired storytelling. Their vision is to create a visceral journey for listeners in everything they do, and they do it well. Ladies and gentlemen, Star Parodi and Jeff Fair. Originally from northern Spain, Rafa Sardina has done it all. 19-time Grammy and Latin, 19. Now you're just showing off. A 19-time Grammy and Latin Award winner as a musician, engineer, and producer. Rafa's credits include folks like Alejandro Sanz, Luis Miguel, Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson, D'Angelo, and Lady Gaga, among many others. He's a governor for the LA chapter of the Recording Academy, and as of yesterday was voted the head of the producers and engineers wing for the Recording Academy. Congratulations. Yeah. And has served on the board of the Latin Recording Academy. His latest venture, which is an exciting one, is actually opening the LA campus of the esteemed Abbey Road Institute, which I'm hoping you will tell us about. How lucky are we? This is like the best Wednesday ever. All the other Wednesdays are going to have to work really hard to be as good as this one. The one other thing that I'd like to say before we get started, we need to thank the people who make this event possible, and that's our tireless sound crew. From those of us who work in the shadows, we see you. Thank you very much for all that you do for us. Thank you. Are you ready? Are you ready? All right, let's get into it. So, for the panel, if we could just sort of go through, please tell us about your path to the music industry. What was your first gig, and how did you land it? Rafa, I'll start with you. We'll kind of go down this way.
Thank you for coming. Actually, my first path to being involved with the music industry happened because I was a musician, a guitar player. From the age of 7, it was clear to me I wanted to perform, I wanted to be in it, right? But my first aha moment didn't actually happen until I was 15, 16 years old, and that's when I actually did record an album in a recording studio and with the band, and I realized that there was so much more happening behind the scenes, that there was even another layer of industry or creative things happening beyond just the aspect of creating the music. I discovered the recording of the music, the production of the music, and that changed my life. And from that point on, I pursued it tirelessly. That was my mission, to be somehow involved in the music industry. And I love production and I love engineering. So all of it fit my agenda. I love creating music, I love engineering it, I love producing it. And early on, I was very, very lucky to find my first mentors, which is, I think, something that we should talk about today, Yeah. And yeah, I was very, very lucky to have amazing mentors that propel my career, or at least help me get some answers about life, not even just about the industry, but about life, how to plan for the next step. And in the meantime, I did 4 years of medical school. Which- but while I was doing music, I almost killed myself in the process because it was very, very demanding, obviously. And
Because you were around doctors then, I guess.
yeah. But yeah, that's the core of how I got started.
Fantastic. Candy, how about you? What was your path to the industry?
So, my path started really young as well. I grew up in a family of musicians, so I kind of grew up in the studio. My mom was a singer-songwriter working with artists in Detroit, Motown artists, and all types of artists. And I discovered when we had equipment just in our living room, and they told me not to touch it. Um, so I was a bit hard-headed, and got my hands on a beat machine, and
An MPC, right?
on an MPC.
Right on.
And someone pressed play and was like, "This isn't what we did." And then she's like, "It's actually good." And so I started working in the industry at 15. She worked with Westbound Records and the Parliament Funkadelic, and they were coming out with like a new generation of artists. And so I was one of the producers at 15 working with those artists. So that's how I got my start. And yeah, I mean, it was extremely demanding. I think coming from the family, and since everything was accessible, the passion was there, but it was just like, I don't want to listen to my mom. so I kind of phased and went to college as well for business, and I did 4 years, got my bachelor's, and then got my master's. And yeah, it was an interesting detour to end up back here in this space. So.
Right on. Star, how about you? Thank you for sharing.
That's such a great question because I don't know that there was one start. I had a lot of different starts with a lot of different opportunities because I am a musician. So I started as a musician and I still am one, just so passionate. And as Rafa said, like, I just love music so much. But also I'm a composer. And so I got starts from different ways for both of those professions. As a musician, I was embraced. I played with a lot of soul bands and a lot of R&B funk bands, a lot of people that your mom probably was working with, and I just felt very embraced by the community of musicians, and I think they saw this young woman who was 17, 18 years old, just wanting to soak up every bit of essence of what everybody was doing. And so everybody helped me a lot, and I was so blessed to play with so many great people. And so that was kind of how I got in as a musician. And then my big break as a musician was working on the Arsenio Hall show, which I was on for 6 years, and in the band, and got to play with all my heroes, and also allowed me to stay in town and work on writing. And there was a mentor who was probably the most prolific television composer at the time, Mike Post, and he hired me to be on his team, and I worked on about 13 of his network shows writing. I had never written for an orchestra before, and he knew it, but he was gonna break me up, and so I just studied scores and stayed up all night, sometimes 3 days at a time, to make these deadlines, and I learned pretty much in the field, under fire for everything. And both of those careers have served me because I think that music is so intertwined that there's not really one thing, that's taken me and Jeff to producing some Grammy-winning albums, and, to doing some really cool stuff. And I think it's just all one wonderful big thing.
Wow, just like Star had said, there's really no one thing, and I think probably everybody here, we're a bit of multi-hyphenates. In the music industry these days, you can be somebody who focuses laser sharp on a single task, but most of us, you know, we become, I want to say, almost DIY, you know, people. We see the technology has grown so much in the period of time that we've been doing it that we have to grasp each of these new tools and find ways to use them to produce the things that the end result of what we want. So, you know, there's been many different layers. I used to, when I was a teenager, I ran sound for the Ramones when they'd come to town, or Dizzy Gillespie, or, you know, things like that. And that was all because I worked for a sound system company who sold recording equipment and did sound system design. And the people that owned the equipment, they, you know, they'd get rentals, and the artist team would call them up and say, hey, can somebody come run sound? You know, things like that. But what I did notice, and what I have noticed over the years, is that every first gig in whatever area it is has always come through a personal relationship. And I think that is the most important point of it. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So Candy, I'll start with you, though I'd love to hear from everyone on this one. Who was your earliest mentor who wasn't your mom? And what advice did they offer that stayed with you?
This is really hard. So in my space, I didn't really have traditional people that were like, I'm your mentor. I was just surrounded by musicians. So when I was in the space of the studio or even at home, we would have sessions in the living room. I would call everyone was my aunt or my uncle in the industry that would come around. And so I look at that as mentorship because, you know, they would say, hey, go plug this in. And then I would get curious and watch what they did and just soaked up the knowledge from being in the space. But it wasn't traditional curated mentorship. And then one thing about it was I was so young, and then I was a female. And my mom was always the only female in her space. She was the singer-songwriter, and then everyone that was in the band were men, and they were musicians. And so it was not traditional to have a female mentor. And so I would just call everyone industry uncles. And, you know, if they asked me to plug in something, and then they would say, no, you're doing it wrong, and then show me what to do in the studio, or when they picked up an instrument, I would, you know, grasp the sound. I remember falling asleep when they rehearsed Stevie Wonder's Superstition all day. They were preparing to do a gig in Japan, and it was literally in my brain, so I could literally, next thing you know, I'm like beatboxing the whole song, and I know every chord arrangement and everything. So a lot of the knowledge that I soaked in didn't really come from what we call traditional mentorship, but there was always people I could call on if I needed something. I would say the biggest piece, they would say you would have to be really confident, and the music always has to be good. Even today when I go back home, you know, everything is so accessible. We have all this technology. And I remember having a conversation with one of my industry uncles, and I'm like, you know, I have some kids, and they're dope, and, you know, and all they got to do is just plug the stuff in and then go ahead and do what they do, even if it's on the phone, and their music is okay. He's like, the music always has to be great. And then that's always what we led with, even when I was younger. So it's like technology doesn't replace those hours that you have to put in to be your best, and that's what they shot for, because they only really had one take to do the things that they did when they jammed out. They were working on reel-to-reel or tape-to-tape back then, which is crazy, because, like, now it's copy-paste. But I saw all of that, and so, you know, I come from a space of when technology and the beat machines came out, but I got a chance to see how hard they worked then. They were playing keys with one hand and one finger, and I'm like, you're crazy, like, what? And so, yeah, it's interesting now, and now I'm in a space of being a mentor, and I'm a part of so many mentorship programs. It's crazy right now. But we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Any other like teachers or mentors that shared something with you that has just stayed with you?
For me, actually, was one of the first people that hired me when I was only like 17 years old. And it actually happened to be live sound. That's the first thing I did. I didn't even get into studio work right away. It didn't happen that way. There were not that many possibilities where I grew up. There were only very few studios. And I didn't even know where they were. Only the one studio where I worked on that album when I was 15, 16, which is in San Sebastian, northern Spain, close to France. But other than that, I didn't do it. I didn't know anything. So I just, met this guy who needed some, basically gophers, people to help with the live shows, and I just check in. I wanted to be as close to music as possible. So very, very soon he made me actually responsible and the GM of the sound company. So, and it always puzzled me and how he pushed me into taking into that responsibility. But by doing so, and me not really understanding at the moment why, he was really giving me a very important tool, which was like that self-confidence. And he basically taught me to put the hours, put the work. Nothing happens without the work, but if you see it possible, it will be possible. So I learned all about even wiring the whole system, the technical aspect of all of it. So I became sort of like a techie kind of guy, even though I wasn't. I had interest on electronics, those type of things, but maybe not at that level. And I learned all about that. And then I learned about the management of the company, about the scheduling. I learned about all of those type of responsibilities, the cost of things. What happens if we have to do if there is a cancellation? All of the risk management of touring, right? Which was crazy. I mean, the amount of times you have to cancel, postpone, it's crazy. And we work with a lot of international artists. So he's the guy who will bring like James Brown to Europe, for example. So I did tours with James Brown, with Paul Motion. I mean, with amazing bands all over the spectrum, from soul to gospel to folk music, I don't know, the Chieftains to, it was just a unique learning experience. And what you learn from all of that is to gain that self-confidence and to learn how important it is, the human aspect of relationships, how to hone those relationships, how to take care of them, how to always be there on time, have some kind of etiquette to everything you do. You need to be a good hang, but on top of it, you need to do, like you said, your best. You need to create something great. You always have to aspire to be the best all the time. So yeah, that's why for me that mentor was so important, and we still talk every once in a while. He just retired like a year and a half ago, and we still talk and we still meet, and yeah, he was fantastic for my career. He gave me that confidence.
It sounds like in part just because he invested in you, like he cared.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's a key point about, that kind of investment that we need to do even as established professionals. Where do we invest in terms of who do we mentor and how do we mentor those people?
I'm curious, this is a question for the panel. Have you all done, obviously just by being here today, and thank you all for doing that, you're sharing with what you do, but I'm curious if there are other times or places, or if someone were interested in having you do mentorship, how would they contact you? Is that something that you're open to doing?
Yeah, they call you.
They call you.
No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
I'm joking. No, I'm open to it. I do a lot with the Grammys, Grammy U, Grammy Next. I do even my own personal independent, many schools across the country send me people, even internationally.
Yeah.
Berkeley College of Music. I mean, you name it, all of them. USC, you name it. But yeah, I really put the time to also do that. I think it's very, very important.
Star, how about you?
Well, I just wanted to say something because I think a lot of people here are teachers. Is that right? So I wanted to talk about.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk about the importance of a great teacher that was someone that changed my life, which I guess you could call them a mentor. And just like what Candy was saying, like, I think that when I was coming up, there were no, quote, mentors, as you know, as there was no programs. But there was this teacher. I was studying piano. I started studying piano kind of late, at around 14 years old, but I just threw myself into it. So all I did was practice all the time, and when I was maybe about 15 or 16, I was studying. I was going to UCLA to study with a teacher there, and he had me playing a bunch of classical music, and some of it was. I would go and just learn all the solos off of the radio and stuff. And I loved classical music, but there was this one Haydn sonata that was torturing me. I hadn't practiced it. I didn't want to play it. And I went to the lesson, I hadn't practiced. And I started to cry. I made all these excuses. I'm sick. I have a headache. I didn't practice. I don't, like everything, everything that I could think of. And instead of just berating me, he just sat there for a minute, and he took a piece of score paper, and he wrote a poem on it. And it was a very visual poem about the thunderclouds and the rain, and just very simple poem. And he said, "All right, then play that." And I was like, "Whoa, okay." So I read the poem, I closed my eyes, and I started to improvise, which I'd never done before. And I started to see things in a visual manner, and it really changed my life. And then, so after that, every lesson, he would write a poem, we would play, and then I would, play the other stuff that I was playing. But I just feel like the arts are really healing, and are gonna heal the world and change the world. And the programs that kids, they just don't even know what they know. They don't know what's inside of them. And the vision of a teacher that is not going to tear you apart, but is going to try to find that, it really changed my life. So that was just something I wanted to share.
Candy, when you do your mentorship work, what does that look like? What does that look like? How do people connect with you to do that?
So being authentic is like the name of the game with me. Like, I already have the passion for music, knowing the tools coming from industry to classroom, but I always tell my students to be authentic. My approach is really to see what they already know. I think that one of the things I learned coming up, I went to the studio, a producer that actually worked with Dr. Dre and Snoop early on in their career. He was one of the industry uncles that had me in the studio. And I was almost about to get kicked out of the studio because I was so young. I used to suck my finger and I had ponytails. And so I'm in the room with the equipment, and the owner of the studio, a songwriter, Barrett Strong, he passed away, but he worked with Motown. And he's like, "Get this little girl out of my room." And so I would say my mentor, he advocated for me, and he said, "No, that's the little girl that I'm telling you about. Just leave her in there for a few minutes and see what happens." And then they went and had a meeting, and then he came back, and I had like 3 ideas, and they were like, "Okay, press play." And so he was the one that gave me the space. And even when I talk to parents come to me and they say, "It's great, what you're doing and all of this stuff. Now, what do I do next?" And I might just give them the time and the space because they need to be able to flush their ideas authentically, not with any judgment. And that's one of the biggest takes. I tell the students to be authentic, and then once they come back and I see that they're working, then it's about placing them in the right position. So positioning was everything. And I didn't know I had people behind the scenes like, "Hey, Candy needs to do this. Let's invite her over here." And then I would do it, and they're like, "See, I knew she would be great for it." And so an example of that, I got a chance to take one of my mentees the other day to the Wu-Tang concert, and the Lennon Bus was there. And she got a chance to go on board and record 3 verses, and the RZA and Method Man came on board, and it was a life-changing experience for her because it was about positioning. Like, I already know you know your craft. Now you need to be able to put it in action. And so sometimes people just need the space. They don't really need you to talk. It's just like, here, go over there and let's see what you do. But it's also, I've watched you and I trust you. So now you need to be able to flex that muscle, right? And so that's what it's really been about. Positioning, flexing the muscle, and being the example is really important. I think mentorship, a lot of students will respect you when they see you doing the work. A lot of work that I've gotten, I've brought into the classroom like, hey, what do y'all think about this? And then see what they say. And then they're like, you're working on that? And I'm like, yeah. So it's like they want to mirror what you do, you know? So leading by example is extremely important as well.
That's great. Jeff, so today everything changes so fast. How do you stay current with technologies as well as just kind of with the overall industry landscape?
I just asked ChatGPT, right? That's a really good question, and it's actually something I invest a lot of time in. As we had a beautiful studio in Pacific Palisades, and it unfortunately didn't survive the fire. Along with, we had her piano was the piano that The Wizard of Oz was recorded on. It was, from the MGM scoring stage of Steinway B, 1928. And that studio was largely based in a hybrid world of a lot of analog. I mean, it was like a museum in a way. There's Oingo Boingo's Mini Moog, and there's the 2-inch, and there's all this other stuff. And with the fire coming, and basically, erasing everything except for, the microphones I was able to put in a laundry hamper and get out to the car and stuff. A lot of what we've had the chance now to kind of rebuild a bit, not in our permanent place, but a couple of writing rooms, and we both made the decision consciously to basically go more lean and mean and really try to take advantage of the technology. I mean, things like the Focusrite line 16. We love the atoms that you guys do as well. Those are things that we grasped from our previous studio in a way, and now we're using the more modern versions of that. But the whole process of having to rebuild and stuff, of course, means doing a lot of investing in reading, in just checking things out. So most of the information that I get, in the short answer, is online.
Yeah. Lots of Andrew Shep's YouTube videos, I'm guessing.
A little bit of that, but
I don't. Anybody else?
not too much parallel compression.
Yeah, I think that's actually quite a learning process, right? When something like this happens to you. It's like it happened to me right before the pandemic. I lost all of my presets for some of the stuff that I do, right? And people talk about presets, and that was a blessing. Seriously, it was a blessing because I lost all of my, I don't know, preset ways of working or thinking about anything, thinking about music. Music is free. It's more free than any preset that you can, bring along. Obviously, we have methodologies and we have all of that, and I invested a lot of my time and my years to learning the technology. Even early on, in 1990, the first Pro Tools systems, with the very first one, when it was just a stereo, you couldn't even do a crossfade. It didn't exist yet. It was just like a bad cut, but it was amazing, and I invested over the years a lot of time to learn everything, but to learn not to think, to learn it, heavily enough so that I will never have to think about it. I will just have to think about the music. And it's also a great learning experience when you go places and you don't have the tools you are used to. And you have to do it with whatever you have. And that's also the story of my life. Every time I go to produce something in a different country, in a different continent, and they have what they have. And so technology is super, super important, but the most important thing is the concepts. How deeply you understand the concepts of how to do things and what things matter, and then you choose the tools, whatever you have available. But yeah, technology is obviously super important, and now it's going to be changing like dramatically with this, being assisted by AI and all that. He mentioned ChatGPT, but yeah, it's coming.
Yeah, it's changed since we've started this panel, I think. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And I just wanted to say, like, after the fire, because we lost all our instruments and basically everything we had. And I remember, like, about 3 weeks later, we were in a studio, and I hadn't played a piano or anything. I mean, we were just, freaking out. And I sat down at the piano, and I started to play, and I said, oh, there I am. I'm still me. And I realized that, like, a lot of, like, all the technology and everything, there's no way that you can keep up with every single thing, every single moment. But you have your ears, you have your brain, you have your ideas. And if you carry those with you, then you just use the tools, as Rafa was saying, that are available to you. But I think it's all inside.
I agree. Yeah.
So, how do you think schools can encourage students to be more creative? That one wasn't on the questions I sent before. That's a wild card. I'm so sorry, but that's what.
I want to say, because that's a question, because what we talked about.
Correct.
We recently were speaking with a large group of students at a university in Oklahoma, and it was this whole group of music students. There was about 300, and what they were saying is, I'm new here, I don't know anybody, like, how do I get started? And I thought, look, you have 300 people in this room to collaborate with, to go up to not be shy, and I think that sometimes we get so insulated, and so self-aware, like when you walk into a room and you go, oh, how do I look? Everybody's looking at me when they're really not, and I think that if teachers could encourage their students to collaborate with each other and reach out to each other more, that to me is such a huge thing, because it's all about community.
Yeah.
I totally agree with that. I think that's, and actually your early connections in the industry usually are some of the most important ones that you are going to, rediscover even decades later. Something is going to happen and you're going to find ways to further collaborate, in the future. And I think it's super important, because that's the first point of access. That's the first one. And most people miss on that opportunity, and it's the easy one. Mm-hmm. The rest are going to be harder in life, and that's the simplest one, right? And yeah, I always encourage them to do the same thing. Something I do all the time whenever I give any kind of, get involved with any of these kind of events, is ask the room, do you write down the numbers, or do you have the contact of everybody surrounding you? And sometimes they have been in a program together even for years, and they don't.
Yeah. I mean,
and they don't, and it puzzles me that they don't.
They
have to break that barrier, but they need to be encouraged. And I think that even as teachers, they need to be forced, even in a way, to create collaborative efforts, to say, like, okay, for the next assignment, maybe it's not just like a paper that you do individually, but you have to be forced to collaborate with 2 other people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's very valuable, yeah.
The only path to any gig is through collaboration. It really is. I mean, except for maybe the unique situation of somebody joining an orchestra and having to audition behind a screen. All the other paths they happen through collaboration, through people they know, through people they've developed relationships, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's a teacher. Those are the only pathways into this industry.
Candy, what do you have?
Yeah, I was going to add. So the past 3 years, I taught at Compton Unified, was a founding teacher of their audio production program. And we immediately work as groups. Like the students are in collaborative groups from day one. They're learning about each other, and there's a time limit on like, what do you need to know? Like, who's in the room, and tell me something, and you got a few minutes to do it. And literally, since this industry is heavily done off of deadlines, and pretty much my entire curriculum was based off of industry partners, it was like, we got a deadline and we got to get this done. And then they've also had to watch me work with people that were on the other side of the world. So it's like, I've never met this person in my life in person, but we're online because they just sent me the files, and then we got to mix it and we got to do this. And if not, you see this check, you see this contract here? if we don't get it done by this deadline, then I don't get paid this money. And they're looking at me like, I'm like, yeah, so it is that serious. But, you know, through that process, you build long-lasting relationships, family, and people you can rely on. If I ever need to call someone to mix something really quick, hey, I got a deadline, can you do this while I work on something else? Now I have those connections to do so. And so I think over the last couple of years that I've worked with my students, you know, they were forced to forge relationships in the classroom because there really isn't any choice when you have to get something done. And I think that they were able to learn the importance of that. But it does take that forced action, especially nowadays when they're glued to their phones. So it is not an easy task, but, you know, making it fun, making everything relatable and authentic is the key. Like, seriously, let them make their mistakes, let them talk out of pocket, and then correct them as they go. Like, hey, you know, we're doing this, or we got to do it this way because, you know, we got quality control. We're dealing with the brand. You cannot say those words in the song. You got to redo it, you know? And that's what works, and it's fun. It's good to watch them grow in confidence. And so, yeah, collaboration, I would say that.
I love what you said, and one aspect of what you said about being forced to work in groups, right, as collaborators, but also forcing them to not get the answer from their phone, but to get the answer from the group. And that's something that I always do also, because it forces them to talk, forces them to actually interact with very often they just go automatically to the phone and they ask the phone, you know,
Yeah.
or ask ChatGPT, what do you do with this?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I used to teach an electronic music class at UCLA, and I would always ask everybody to go through and tell us a little bit about yourself. Now I'd reconsider that. What I would do is put everybody in a big circle and have them meet each individual in the class and introduce themselves and just tell one paragraph to each individual person. I think would be a really good exercise because it would break a lot of ice and you know, people would talk to each other more.
That's great. Yeah. So I have one more question, and then I'm going to see if any of you all have questions. So if you've started to think about some, I mean, we could talk for the next 3 hours, right? So, but I'm curious for you all, what advice would you give to a young professional who doesn't have industry connections, but they still want to find a way to get their foot in the door? What do you think?
I'm going to say this is a show and tell business. So coming from high school, especially like how things are taught, I noticed that students aren't really used to hands-on. Like, you're not used to actually showing up and having to show someone you know how to work Pro Tools, or that you know how to do signal flow, you know how to run a session. That is not something that you think you're going to do when you go to an interview. You think you're going to go in and talk. And it's like, no, we have to know that you can do the job. It's about trust in this industry. And so building connections, that's one thing. But when you show up to a session, you need to be prepared. That's another thing. And so knowing your tools is extremely important. So whatever DAW you use, know it in and out. You have to spend those man hours to know how to use the equipment. And then be ready to improvise because everything goes wrong when you show up. Like,
At every level.
and it at every level, and it's just like, okay, phone a friend or what do I need to do? Knowing your stuff is extremely important. So being able to improvise. And then another thing is when you get someone's contact, like we didn't get into like my experience working with Nissan, but I worked with them for 3 years, and someone dropped my name in Chicago. I lived in Chicago for 12 years, and then I moved here, and then people started calling me from Chicago. And I'm like, well, I was there for 12 years, and nobody called me until I moved to LA. Weird. But someone dropped my name, and, you know, they reached out, and they said, hey, you have any music for these briefs? So I sent them some stuff. And then I was like, well, can you tell me exactly what you're looking for? They don't know what they're looking for. So I kept sending music every week, like 10 beats a week, until they called me back, and it took them 2 months to call me back. But when they called back, they was just like, can you tell us your story? Like, we want to know more about you, because this is crazy. Every time we check our inbox, your stuff is in here, and I flooded. Like, I didn't care. I was like, well, I know you're looking for music, so at some point, you're going to call me. But you have to be extremely, like I broke all the rules of engagement, if that's what you want to call it. So yeah, authenticity. Then I told them my story, and they're like, yeah, we're working with you. And that led to us creating projects. Like, of course, they sent me their briefs, and they're like, you know what, let's do something like this. Then I got a chance to pitch ideas, and it was super collaborative, and it worked. But you have to be willing to jump out there and truly be yourself, because it is a creative business. And most of the time, the people that are in the seats, they're doing their job, and it's a corporate job. They don't know what they want. They want to impress. So if I have an idea that I know is kind of like not on the spectrum of what they want to do, but it can impress, then I'm going to shoot my shot, you know? So that's what I would tell young creatives today. Like, don't be afraid. The only answer you can get is no. And then it's like, okay, well, I'm going to still do it, and I'll call you tomorrow, see what the answer is, right?
Fantastic.
Just to add to that, I mean, yeah, you can only, you know, the worst thing that can happen is just no, and then there's tomorrow. But I wanted to say also that there's some really great organizations that have different events, whether they're screenings or networking, mixers and everything. There's the Alliance for Women Film Composers, there's the Society of Composers and Lyricists, there's the Grammys, and you can be a member as a student as well. You can have a student membership, and they have great get-togethers, and everybody goes to them, and when people are at networking events, they're more open than if you just walk up to a producer on a lot and go, hi, my name is, you know, because they don't know you, and they're used to being attacked basically or approached all the time. But if you're at a networking event, you can talk to just anyone, and they'll be willing to talk to you, and you can talk to them, and it's a more equal footing, and there's you know, as long as you show a lot of respect for yourself and for the people that you're talking to, you're going to meet all kinds of people, and some of those organizations are not that expensive to join. Or maybe there's even some kind of help that you could get if your students didn't have the money to join. But those kind of events are just gold, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. When I was only like 19 and I came for the first time when I was 16. My parents moved here to San Diego. But then I never stayed. I went back to Europe. But when I came back to stay because I wanted to pursue my career, the first thing, I didn't know anybody, like zero, like nobody. Within a year, I was working with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, with Rolling Stones, with Madonna, I don't know, with everybody. But the one thing I did as soon as I landed here, I became member of every single organization that I could find out. And it's funny, I didn't even become member of the Grammys until I won like 4 Grammys. Because I didn't know about that one. I thought it was an exclusive club or something. And then I learned that wasn't the case. So the best thing to do is ask. And I became member of the AES, Audio Engineering Society, of the Media Association, and even things that I didn't truly understand 100% how they work. But I used to go to every get-together, anything. And these days, there are lots of them. There are lots of small events that they throw in all across the country, even internationally. Become part of that. I mean, that's an amazing resource of contacts. Yeah.
I was gonna
Like ASCAP and BMI and CSAC also do that.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely,
definitely,
yeah.
definitely. And that doesn't cost anything to join.
Exactly. I go
And-
to the ASCAP, and
Yeah.
I go to the CSAC, and I go to all of those, and I am BMI.
Yeah.
I am signed with the other company, but I go to, they invite me even to the other ones. And even if they don't invite me, I find somebody who can bring me.
Yeah.
I think it's important to be around the right people, you know.
Yeah. Candy, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I was going to say for your students, like I was a part of Grammy U right after college. Now they've made the age limit, I think, lower, like younger. So your students can join Grammy U. I was a Grammy U mentor for the past 3 years, which has been great. I've worked, like my mentee this past year, we worked on so much music together, and she's so amazing. And then she is the music. I'm a mentor with that, with production and engineering. And I think Alicia Keys, and there's quite a few other people that are co-founders of that. I'm a part of quite a few other organizations, ASCAP. So this stuff is readily available for students to join, even as teachers. So then you have access to then take back to your students and can network to build those relationships too. So I encourage everyone to do that. The stuff doesn't cost that much money, but you will be in the room and shake hands with the people you need to know.
100%. On behalf of all of us at Focusrite, I'd like to thank our panelists, Dope Candy, Star Parodi, Jeff Fair, and Rafa Sardina. Thank you so much for being here.